Undercover owner orders chili dog, freezes when waitress says we're treated like trash. Harold Lawson pulled his beat-up Honda into the gravel parking lot of Millie's diner, watching dust swirl around his tires in the late afternoon sun. The faded red and white sign creaked in the autumn breeze, paint peeling at the edges like old skin. This wasn't how he remembered his diners looking. Harry killed the engine and stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. The man looking back barely resembled the polished CEO who'd built a restaurant empire from a single roadside diner 43 years ago. Gone was the expensive suit, replaced by a threadbare corduroy jacket he'd found in a thrift store that morning. His usual Italian leather shoes sat in a box at home, swapped for scuffed work boots that pinched his feet. Wire-rimmed glasses instead of contacts, and he'd even mussed his silver hair to look properly disheveled. Perfect disguise for a weary traveling salesman, he thought, adjusting the fake wedding ring on his finger. His real one, the gold band Millie had slipped on his finger all those years ago, stayed safe in his jacket pocket, too precious to risk in this charade. The complaints had been piling up for months. Not just the usual gripes about slow service or cold food, but something deeper. Something that made his gut twist with worry. Staff turnover through the roof. Customers writing angry letters about rude treatment. Health inspection scores dropping. And this particular location in Cedar Falls, Ohio, a town of barely 8,000 people, had generated more complaints than any other franchise in his entire chain. Harry climbed out of the Honda, his knees protesting. At 67, these undercover missions were getting harder on his body, but they were the only way to see the truth. Corporate visits always came with advance notice, fresh paint, and nervous managers putting on their best behavior. Real problems stayed hidden behind forced smiles and rehearsed speeches. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped inside, the familiar sound tugging at his heart. Every Millie's diner had the same bell, his wife's idea from the very beginning. People should know they're welcome the moment they walk in, she'd said, hanging that first brass bell in their original location back in 1981. The interior hit him like a memory he tried to forget. Cracked red vinyl booths lined the windows, their stuffing poking through in places. The black and white checkered floor was dulled with old wax and ground-in dirt. Even the jukebox in the corner, another of Millie's touches, sat silent and dark, probably broken for months. This wasn't the warm, inviting space his wife had envisioned. This felt like a place that had given up. "Sit anywhere you like, hon," called a tired voice from behind the counter. Harry chose a stool at the far end, positioning himself to observe the entire dining room. The late lunch crowd was thin, just an elderly couple sharing pie, a trucker reading a newspaper, and a construction worker scrolling his phone. For a Friday afternoon in a town this size, the place should have been buzzing. The waitress approached, and Harry's heart sank a little more. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark circles under her eyes and hair pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days. Her name tag read Clara, in faded letters, and her smile looked like it hurt to wear. "What can I get you?" she asked, sliding a menu across the counter without much enthusiasm. Harry didn't need to look. He'd memorized every item on that menu decades ago. "I'll take a chili dog, please. And coffee. Black." Something flickered in Clara's expression. Surprise, maybe? "The chili dog? Really? Is there a problem with it?" No. It's just..." She shrugged, jotting the order on her pad. "Most folks don't order that one anymore. Coming right up." As she walked away, Harry felt a familiar ache in his chest. The chili dog had been Millie's creation, her signature dish that put their first diner on the map. She'd spent weeks perfecting the recipe, the perfect blend of spices, the homemade chili sauce, the way she'd toast the bun just right. It was the meal that launched their empire, the dish that made couples drive 20 miles out of their way just to taste it. "Every bite should tell a story," Millie used to say, ladling chili over fresh hot dogs with the precision of an artist. "Food isn't just fuel, Harry. It's comfort. It's home." Now, watching Clara move through the empty diner with slumped shoulders and forced politeness, Harry wondered what story his food was telling these days. And more importantly, what story his employees were living. The kitchen was visible through a pass-through window, where Harry could see a heavy-set man in a stained apron barking orders at a young cook. Even from across the room, the tension was obvious. The cook jumped at every command, his movements quick and nervous. This wasn't right. None of it was right. Clara returned with his coffee, the cup stained and the liquid lukewarm. "Food'll be up in a minute," she said, already turning to leave. "Slow day?" Harry asked, keeping his voice casual. She paused, studying him with tired eyes. "Every day's slow now. We used to be packed, but—" She trailed off, glancing toward the kitchen where the manager's voice could be heard growing louder. "Well, things change, I guess." There was something in her tone, resignation mixed with barely contained frustration. Harry sipped his coffee and waited, sensing she had more to say. In his experience, people usually did. They just needed someone willing to listen. And today, Harold Lawson, successful businessman and owner of 127 restaurants, was going to be that someone. Even if it broke his heart in the process. Clara returned 15 minutes later, sliding a plate across the counter with the same mechanical precision she'd shown with the coffee. The chili dog sat before Harry like a sad reminder of better times. The bun slightly soggy, the chili congealed around the edges, steam rising weakly from what should have been a piping hot meal. Harry stared at it, remembering the masterpiece Millie used to create. Her chili dogs came out sizzling, the homemade sauce rich and fragrant, the bun perfectly toasted with a hint of butter. This looked like it had been sitting under a heat lamp for an hour. "Everything okay?" Clara asked, noticing his hesitation. "Looks great," Harry lied, picking up the lukewarm hot dog. He took a small bite, the flavors flat and uninspiring on his tongue. The meat was overcooked, the chili watery. It tasted nothing like the dish that had made his wife famous in 3 counties. Clara lingered by the counter, wiping down spots that were already clean. Her movements were automatic, distracted, like someone going through the motions of living without really participating. "You from around here?" she asked, her voice carrying that practiced small-talk tone that waitresses perfected after years of serving strangers. "Just passing through," Harry replied, setting the chili dog down after another disappointing bite. "Sales route takes me all over Ohio. This seemed like a nice little town to stop in. Used to be nicer," Clara muttered, then caught herself. She glanced toward the kitchen where the manager's voice could be heard berating someone about portion sizes. Her whole body tensed, like a dog expecting to be kicked. "Clara!" The shout came from the pass-through window. "Table 4 is still waiting for their check." She flinched visibly, her shoulders drawing up around her ears. "Yes, Rick," she called back, her voice strained but obedient. The transformation was instant, from a tired but genuine person to a nervous employee walking on eggshells. Harry watched her hurry to table 4, apologizing profusely to the elderly couple for something that clearly wasn't her fault. The way she moved, quick and anxious, reminded him of his daughter's old dog whenever thunderstorms approached. Always expecting the next crack of lightning. When she returned to refill his coffee, Harry decided to test the waters. "Seems like a stressful job," he said gently. Clara's laugh was bitter. "You could say that." She poured the coffee with shaking hands, a few drops spattering onto the counter. "Sorry," she whispered, immediately reaching for her towel. "Don't worry about it," Harry said. "I've worked plenty of tough jobs myself. Construction, factory work, you name it. Sometimes the bosses make it harder than it needs to be." Something in his tone must have resonated with her, because Clara's defensive posture softened slightly. She leaned against the counter, just for a moment, as if the weight of standing had become too much to bear. "How long have you worked here?" Harry asked. 3 years, she said, staring at her reflection in the coffee pot. "Started right after my son was born. Single mom, you know? Needed something flexible, and the old manager, Janet, she was really understanding. Let me bring Tommy in sometimes when I couldn't find a sitter. This place was different then." "Different how?" Clara glanced toward the kitchen again, where Rick's voice had risen to a near shout about something involving inventory. She moved closer to Harry, lowering her voice to barely above a whisper. We used to actually care about the food. About the customers. Janet would taste everything that went out, make sure it was perfect. And the staff, we were like a family. We covered for each other, celebrated birthdays, helped out when someone was struggling. Her eyes grew distant. The tips were decent, people actually wanted to eat here, and we took pride in what we did. What happened to Janet? Corporate decided she was too soft, Clara said, making air quotes with her fingers. Brought in Rick about 8 months ago to increase efficiency and profit margins. Her voice dripped with disdain. First thing he did was cut our hours, then he started keeping half the tips for administrative fees. Good people started quitting, and he doesn't care. About anything. As if summoned by their conversation, Rick appeared at the pass-through window, a stocky man with greasy hair and small, mean eyes. Clara! Stop chatting and get back to work. I don't pay you to make friends. The effect on Clara was immediate and heartbreaking. She straightened like she'd been slapped, the brief moment of openness vanishing behind a mask of compliance. Sorry, she whispered to Harry, not meeting his eyes. Clara! I'm coming, she called back, her voice cracking slightly. But before she could move away, something seemed to break inside her. The words came out in a rush, raw and desperate, meant for this stranger who'd shown her a moment of kindness. We're treated like trash here, she said, her voice barely audible but heavy with pain. Complete and utter trash. Harry froze. The chili dog grew cold on his plate, forgotten. Those words, "we're treated like trash," hit him like a physical blow. He stared at Clara as she hurried away, her confession hanging in the air between them like an accusation. This is what I built, he thought, watching her disappear into the kitchen to face Rick's wrath. This is what happened to Millie's dream. Harry sat frozen at the counter, Clara's words echoing in his mind like a curse. We're treated like trash. The chili dog before him had gone completely cold, but he couldn't bring himself to take another bite. Every time he looked at it, he saw Millie's disappointed face staring back at him. Clara returned 20 minutes later, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to make herself invisible. She carried a fresh pot of coffee and a hollow expression that made Harry's chest tighten. Refill? She asked, her voice professionally neutral again. Please, Harry said softly. As she poured, he noticed her hands were steadier now, as if sharing her burden had given her some small measure of strength. Are you okay? Clara glanced around the nearly empty diner, then leaned slightly closer. The elderly couple had left, and the trucker was absorbed in his newspaper. Only the construction worker remained, earbuds in, lost in whatever was playing on his phone. You seem like a decent guy, she said quietly. So I'm going to give you some advice. Don't come back here. Find somewhere else to eat. Why? Harry asked, though he suspected he already knew. She poured coffee for herself in a chipped mug, cradling it like it was the only warmth left in her world. Because this place is dying, and Rick's killing it one employee at a time. The words came easier now, as if a dam had finally broken. Clara told him about Sarah, the cook who'd worked here for 7 years before Rick arrived. She'd been like a grandmother to the staff, teaching new hires and keeping everyone's spirits up. Rick fired her for insubordination, after she questioned why he was pocketing money from the tip jar. Sarah's replacement lasted 2 weeks. Clara continued, stirring her coffee absently. Kid was 18, fresh out of high school. Rick screamed at him so badly over a burned burger that the boy walked out mid-shift, crying. Haven't seen him since. Harry felt something cold settle in his stomach. He built this empire on the foundation of treating people with dignity, a principle Millie had insisted on from day one. Happy employees make happy customers, she'd always said. Take care of your people, and they'll take care of everything else. What about the other staff? He asked. There aren't many left, Clara said with a bitter smile. Marcus in the kitchen, he's good, but Rick treats him like dirt. Makes him work double shifts, then threatens to fire him if he complains. Marcus has 3 kids and can't afford to quit. She gestured toward the empty dining room. Jenny used to work the morning shift. 15 years she was here, knew every customer's name and coffee preference. Rick fired her for being 5 minutes late. Never mind that her car broke down, or that she'd never been late before in her entire time here. Each story felt like a physical blow to Harry. These weren't just complaints on paper anymore. These were real people, with families and dreams and bills to pay. People whose lives had been upended by the monster he'd unknowingly hired. The tips, Harry said, remembering what she'd mentioned earlier. Tell me about that. Clara's jaw tightened. Rick implemented a tip-sharing policy when he started. Said it was to ensure fairness among staff. But there's only 3 of us left, and somehow the math never adds up right. A good night might bring in $60 in tips, but we'll each get 10 if we're lucky. Rick claims the rest goes to administrative costs and equipment maintenance. She made air quotes, her voice dripping with disgust. Meanwhile, he drives a brand new Escalade. Harry's hands clenched involuntarily. Tip theft was illegal, and it went against everything he built his business on. His original franchise agreements specifically prohibited managers from touching employee tips. The fact that it was happening in his own restaurant, under his own name, made him feel physically sick. Why don't you report him? Harry asked. Surely there's someone higher up you could talk to. Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. To who? Corporate? Rick's the one who talks to them. He sends glowing reports every month about how efficient things are running. Lower labor costs, reduced waste, improved profit margins. On paper, we're a model location. She was right, and Harry knew it. Rick's financial reports had been stellar, costs down, profits up. It was why headquarters had held him up as an example during regional manager meetings. Harry felt the bile rise in his throat as he realized what those numbers really represented. The customers noticed too. Clara continued, refilling his cup again. Food quality's gone down because Rick buys the cheapest ingredients possible. Service is slower because we're understaffed. People who used to come in daily don't bother anymore. The Miller family, they've been eating here since before I started. They told me last week they're driving 20 miles to the next town because the food's gotten so bad. Harry stared at his untouched chili dog, seeing it with new eyes. Not just poor quality food, but a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. The watery chili, the soggy bun, the lukewarm temperature, it was all representative of a business that had lost its soul. How did I let this happen? He thought, guilt twisting in his stomach like a living thing. How did I become so removed from what was happening in my own restaurants? The answer, he realized, was painfully simple. Success had made him comfortable, and comfort had made him blind. As if Clara's words had summoned a demon from the depths of the kitchen, Rick Dawson emerged through the swinging doors with the swagger of a man drunk on petty power. Harry watched him approach, stocky frame straining against a food-stained polo shirt, thinning hair slicked back with too much gel, and eyes that held the cold calculation of a schoolyard bully who'd never grown up. Rick's gaze immediately locked onto Clara, and Harry saw her entire body language shift. Her shoulders hunched forward defensively, her movements became quicker and more nervous, and that tired but genuine warmth she'd shown him disappeared behind a mask of fearful compliance. Clara! Rick's voice cut through the diner like a rusty knife, loud enough for every remaining customer to hear. What did I tell you about wasting time chatting with customers? Harry felt his jaw clench, but forced himself to remain still. From his position at the counter, he had a perfect view of the entire scene unfolding. The construction worker looked up from his phone, clearly uncomfortable. The trucker folded his newspaper, watching with the wary attention of someone who'd witnessed too many workplace confrontations. I was just refilling his coffee, Rick, Clara said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. And checking if he needed anything else. Checking if he needed anything else? Rick's voice dripped with mockery. For 20 minutes? What could possibly take 20 minutes? Writing his life story? Harry's hands gripped his coffee cup so tightly he was surprised it didn't shatter. This was exactly the kind of public humiliation that Millie had sworn would never happen in their restaurants. "Dignity," she used to say, "is something everyone deserves, especially at work. The moment you take that away from someone, you've lost your humanity." Clara's cheeks flushed red with embarrassment. "I'm sorry. I was just..." "You were just what?" "Standing around gossiping while table two's been waiting for their check for 10 minutes, and the coffee station looks like a hurricane hit it." Rick stepped closer to her, invading her personal space in a way that made Harry's blood pressure spike. "Maybe you forgot, but I don't pay you to make friends. I pay you to work. Table 2 paid 20 minutes ago," Clara said, her voice stronger now, though Harry could see her hands shaking. "And I cleaned the coffee station twice since." "Don't talk back to me!" Rick's voice exploded through the diner, causing the construction worker to actually flinch. "I'm sick of your attitude, Clara. You think because you've been here a few years that gives you the right to argue with management?" Harry felt something snap inside his chest. He'd watched enough. His hands moved to the edge of the counter, ready to stand up and end this charade right now. But then Clara spoke, and her words stopped him cold. "Please, Rick. I need this job." "My son." "Your son isn't my problem." Rick cut her off. "Your personal life isn't my problem. The only thing that's my problem is making sure this place runs efficiently, and right now, you're the biggest obstacle to that efficiency." Harry's vision actually blurred with rage. He thought of Millie, how she would have handled employees with children. She'd kept a small play area in the back of their original diner, complete with coloring books and crayons. She'd personally helped 3 different single mothers through tough times, advancing pay when needed, adjusting schedules around childcare issues. "We're not just feeding people," she'd said. "We're taking care of our community." Rick continued his assault, his voice carrying to every corner of the now silent diner. "You want to keep this job? Then do it. Stop the chit-chat, stop the excuses, and start acting like a professional. Otherwise, there are plenty of people in this town who'd love to have your position." Clara nodded quickly, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "Yes, sir. I understand." "Good. Now get table 6 cleaned up. They left 5 minutes ago, and it's still a mess. Then restock the napkin dispensers, mop the bathrooms, and when you're done with that, we need to talk about your schedule next week. I'm cutting your Thursday shift." Harry watched Clara scurry away, her dignity stripped as publicly and cruelly as if Rick had physically slapped her. The other customers avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. The whole scene left a toxic atmosphere hanging over the diner like smoke from a grease fire. Rick turned his attention to the dining room, straightening salt shakers and adjusting chairs with exaggerated authority. When he passed table 4, where a young family had been eating, Harry noticed something that made his stomach drop. A $5 bill lay on the table, clearly left as a tip. Without hesitation, Rick palmed it smoothly, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. The casual theft was performed with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it countless times before. Harry stared at the cold chili dog on his plate, and suddenly it became more than just bad food. It was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, everything that had been corrupted and poisoned. Millie's legacy, built on love and community and treating people with dignity, had been turned into this. A place where good people were humiliated and robbed by petty tyrants who cared only about their own power. The chili dog sat there, congealed and forgotten, just like the values that had once made these diners special. Just like the employees who'd been driven away, and the customers who'd stopped coming, and the dream that was slowly dying one cruel act at a time. Harry couldn't taste the bitterness of the food anymore. He could only taste the bitterness of his own failure. Rick had moved on to table 6, where the young family with 2 small children had finished their meal and departed. Harry watched with mounting fury as the manager approached their table, casually scanning the dining room before his hand moved toward the crumpled bills left beside empty plates. $12. A modest tip from a family who probably couldn't afford much more, left for Clara, who had been nothing but kind to their fussy toddler. Harry had witnessed her patiently cleaning up spilled juice and bringing extra napkins without a single complaint. Rick's fingers closed around the money with practiced stealth, the bills disappearing into his pocket as smoothly as a magician's trick. But this wasn't magic, it was theft. Plain and simple theft from an employee who was probably wondering how she'd pay for her son's school supplies. That was the moment Harry's restraint finally shattered. The worn corduroy jacket felt suddenly suffocating as he stood up from the counter stool. The wire-rimmed glasses, part of his carefully constructed disguise, came off first, folded and placed deliberately on the counter beside his untouched chili dog. Then he straightened to his full height, 67 years of building an empire evident in the sudden authority that radiated from his frame. "Excuse me." Harry's voice cut through the diner, no longer the tired drawl of a traveling salesman but the commanding tone of a man who'd spent decades making decisions that affected thousands of lives. Rick looked up from table 6, irritation flickering across his features. "Yeah? What do you need?" "I need to know why you just stole money from my employee." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Rick blinked, confused by the change in Harry's demeanor. "What are you talking about, buddy? I think you've been sitting there too long." Harry stepped away from the counter, moving with deliberate slowness toward Rick. Each step seemed to peel away another layer of his disguise, the hunched shoulders straightening, the shuffling gait becoming purposeful, the uncertain expression transforming into something that made seasoned business executives nervous during board meetings. "The $12 you just put in your pocket," Harry said, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the diner. "The money that family left for Clara, my employee." Clara emerged from the kitchen, drawn by the commotion, a tray of clean glasses balanced in her hands. She stopped short when she saw Harry standing in the middle of the dining room, looking nothing like the weary salesman who'd ordered a chili dog an hour ago. "Look, pal, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing," Rick began, but Harry cut him off. "My name is Harold Lawson," he said, each word deliberate and clear. "And I own this restaurant." The effect was instantaneous and electric. Clara's tray slipped from her hands, glasses exploding against the checkered floor in a symphony of shattered crystal. Her mouth fell open, eyes wide with shock and something that might have been hope. The construction worker pulled out his earbuds, suddenly very interested in the drama unfolding before him. The trucker folded his newspaper completely, leaning forward to get a better view. And Rick went from irritated to confused to pale as fresh snow in the span of 3 seconds. That's not, I mean," Rick stammered, his hand unconsciously moving toward his pocket where the stolen bills rested. "Harold Harry Lawson," Harry repeated, pulling his wallet from his jacket and extracting his driver's license and corporate identification. "Founder and CEO of Lawson Family Restaurants. Owner of 127 Millie's diners across 6 states. Including this one." The silence that followed was deafening. Harry could hear the hum of the old refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, the distant sound of traffic on Main Street. But inside the diner, nobody breathed. Clara was staring at him like he just announced he was Superman. Her face cycled through disbelief, recognition, and finally a dawning understanding that made her cover her mouth with both hands. "Oh my God!" she whispered. "I told you. I said we were treated like—" "Oh my God!" "Yes," Harry said gently, turning his attention back to Rick, whose face had gone from pale to green. "You did tell me that. And I want to thank you for your honesty. It takes courage to speak truth to power, even when you don't know you're doing it." Rick found his voice, though it came out as a strangled squeak. "Mr. Lawson, sir, there's been a misunderstanding. I was the money was. I was going to." "You were going to what?" Harry's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "Put it in the tip jar? Give it to Clara? Because from where I was sitting, it looked like you were stealing from your employee." Again. "I can explain." "Then explain," Harry said, crossing his arms. "Explain why Clara told me you've been keeping half the tips. Explain why good employees have quit. Explain why the food quality has dropped. Explain why you just humiliated one of the hardest working people I've ever met in front of a room full of customers. Rick's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. No words came out. Harry reached into his own pocket and pulled out his phone. Don't bother explaining, Rick. Because you're fired. The words fell like a judge's gavel, final and absolute. Effective immediately. Harry continued. Security will escort you from the premises within the hour. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you, minus the tips you've stolen, and yes, we'll be conducting a full audit. Rick's face crumpled. You can't, this isn't fair, I've increased profits. You're done here, Harry said simply. And just like that, the reign of terror was over. The silence following Rick's dismissal stretched like a held breath throughout the diner. Harry watched the disgraced manager stumble toward the kitchen, muttering under his breath about unfairness and corporate politics, but his words carried no weight now. They were just the bitter complaints of a small man whose house of cards had finally collapsed. Clara stood frozen among the scattered glass, her face a canvas of emotions, shock, relief, disbelief, and something that looked dangerously close to tears. The construction worker had given up all pretense of minding his own business and was openly staring. The trucker had pulled out his phone, probably texting someone about the most interesting thing to happen in Cedar Falls in months. Harry turned his attention to Clara, his expression softening from the steel it had been when confronting Rick. Are you okay? She nodded quickly, then shook her head, then laughed, a sound that was half hysteria and half pure relief. I can't believe, you're really him? You're really Harold Lawson? I am, Harry said gently. And I owe you an enormous apology. You owe me, what? Clara's voice cracked. Sir, you don't owe me anything. I'm the one who, I complained to the owner of the whole company. I probably talked your ear off and... You told me the truth. Harry interrupted, moving carefully around the broken glass to stand closer to her. Do you know how rare that is? How valuable that is? Most people tell me what they think I want to hear. You told me what I needed to hear. Marcus appeared from the kitchen, drawn by the commotion. He was younger than Harry had expected, maybe 35, with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands. His expression was wary, the look of someone who'd learned not to trust sudden changes in management. Marcus, Harry said, recognizing him from Clara's description. I'm Harry Lawson. We need to talk. Fear flickered across the cook's face. Sir, I don't know what Rick told you about me, but... Rick didn't tell me anything, Harry said firmly. Clara did. She told me you're a good man trying to support 3 children on wages that barely cover rent. She told me you work double shifts without complaint and that you care about the quality of food you send out, even when management doesn't. Marcus blinked in surprise, glancing between Harry and Clara as if expecting this to be some elaborate prank. Harry looked around the nearly empty diner, his diner, he reminded himself, and felt the full weight of what needed to be done. This wasn't just about firing one bad manager. This was about rebuilding something that had been systematically destroyed. I want you both to listen to me carefully, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent 43 years making promises he intended to keep. Changes start today. Immediately. He pulled out his phone and began typing notes as he spoke. First, wages. Everyone's getting a 20% raise, effective with next week's payroll. Marcus, you mentioned 3 children, you're getting 30%, and we're adding health benefits within 60 days. Clara's hands flew to her mouth again. Marcus just stared. Second, tips. Harry continued. Every penny goes to the staff who earned it. Any manager who touches the tip jar gets fired on the spot, and I mean that literally. We'll install security cameras if we have to. Mr. Lawson. Clara whispered. You don't have to. I'm not finished, Harry said, but his tone was warm, almost fatherly. Third, we're hiring. This location is going back to full staffing, morning shift, evening shift, weekend coverage. Nobody works double shifts unless they choose to, and when they do, it's at overtime rates. He paused, looking around the tired diner with fresh eyes. Fourth, we're renovating. New booths, fresh paint, equipment maintenance, whatever it takes to make this place something the community can be proud of again. The trucker had approached the counter, clearly eavesdropping but trying to appear casual. "Excuse me," he said. "Did you just say you're the owner of all these diners?" "I did." Harry nodded. "Well, I'll be damned." The trucker grinned. "I've been eating at your places for 20 years. My wife and I had our first date at a Millie's Diner in Kentucky back in '03. Something warm flickered in Harry's chest. This was why he and Millie had built their empire, not for profit margins or efficiency reports, but for moments like this. For being part of people's stories. "What's your name, sir?" "Tom Bradley. I drive through here twice a month on my route to Columbus." "Well, Tom, I hope you'll keep stopping by. We're going to make some changes around here." Tom nodded approvingly. "If the food gets half as good as it used to be, you've got a customer for life." Harry walked back to the counter where his cold, chili dog waited. He looked at it for a long moment, then picked it up and took a deliberate bite. It was still lukewarm. Still watery. Still nothing like what Millie used to make. But as he chewed, something remarkable happened. He could taste potential. He could taste the possibility of what it could become again, what this whole place could become with the right people and the right values guiding it. "Clara," he said after swallowing, "would you be interested in a promotion? I need someone to help me find the right manager for this location. Someone who understands what this place used to mean." She nodded, tears finally spilling over. "Yes, sir. I'd be honored." Harry took another bite of the chili dog, and this time, maybe it was his imagination, maybe it was hope, he could swear it tasted just a little bit like home. Just like Millie used to make.